Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Property Manager. I'm your host, Eric Worrell. Andrew Schultz is off this week. He's down in Florida, that lucky guy. And I am joined by a new guest this week. His name is Tracy Streich, and he is from Tulsa, Oklahoma, right, Tracy?
That's right.
And Tracy, you are a property manager. How long have you been in property management for?
Well, so as a professional property manager managing for others, I've been doing this for about 7.5 years. I've managed my own properties in addition to that since about 1999 is when I bought my first rental. So I've been doing it a while.
Yeah. And your company is called Renter's Place, correct?
Renter's Place.
All right.
We manage about right at 500 single family units. And when I say single family duplex, but there's not, a 350 unit apartment complex mixed in there. So we've got a lot of units we cover.
All right. Very nice. So I was talking with Tracy for the last couple of weeks over email. We got connected through, I believe, Brad Larson's Facebook group. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yep. And you just got back from the National NARPM conference. For people that don't know, that's National Association of Residential Property Managers. So maybe you have some fresh insights on some things we're going to be talking about. And probably one of the most interesting things that I think people are always interested in is ESAs and how you handle them. But I'm going to tease that right now. We're going to talk about that towards the end because I want to get as many people on watching that, and we'll do a Q&A on that topic as we go through it. But to start, I thought it'd be interesting to ask 3 questions for Tracy to answer for us. And, just be able to pull the insights out from you being a property manager and being involved with not only being a property manager, but running a property management company.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, why don't we pull those up, and I'll do my little thing where I have a little agenda that I work off of here. So our first question for you, Tracy, and I'm saying our because I'm used to Andrew being on here too.
We'll act like he's there.
Yeah. What is the one purchase of $100 or less that has greatly helped you as a property manager?
All right. So I actually have it here so I can show you. Okay. So we use these code boxes on all of our listings. And it's just, they didn't do a whole lot of thought in making up the name. It's just called code box. And
right to the point.
They cost about $54, and you can have codes in there that are different for, say you want your maintenance guy to have their own code so you can know when they've opened it up. But we do self-showing with Tenant Turner. If you're not familiar with Tenant Turner, there's about 3 of them in the industry that really do the self-showing and scheduling, things like that. Tenant Turner, Show Mojo, and Rently. We settled in on Tenant Turner, and we use Tenant Turner, which costs about $50 a month, along with a $50 lockbox, which that's a one-time. We own the lockbox.
Yep.
And we do self-showings with those, and it is amazing because it will give that tenant a one-time code that they can access the property. The code expires, so they can't go back in the middle of the night, and they'd have to get a new code. But they're putting in their name, their email address, their phone number, and for us, the thing we require on it is uploading a picture of their driver's license before they're actually sent that code. My feeling anymore is if you are not ready and can't show the house right then, you lose them. Because when people call and they say, hey, we're at 4826 South Detroit, or I'm calling about 4826 South Detroit, I'd like to see it. You say, well, when would you like to see it? 99% of the time, what do they say? I'm sitting in front of the house right now.
Yeah.
And if you're 40 minutes away on the other side of town and you're like, well, let me schedule that with you. I can be over there in 2.5, 3 hours. They're gone. They're moving on to the next thing. There's other rentals out there. If they can get in that house right then and see it, they go in, they look at it, they lock it back up. It automatically sends them a text looking for feedback. And then we can easily track who's been in the house, how many showings. So if an owner calls and says, why isn't my house leased? And we can pull it up and say, well, we've shown it 8 times this week, and here's the feedback. So I think even a person that is managing their own property, this is a great tool. Doesn't mean you have to lease it to them. I read a lot of stuff. Well, I like to see them. I like to, look in their car, all this other garbage that doesn't really make any sense. But doesn't mean you have to lease it to them, but you can at least weed out the people that weren't going to rent it anyway, or your no-shows, which was a big problem we would have, even if you would call them ahead of time. Hey, we'll meet you there in an hour. Yeah, I'm on my way. And then they no-show. Just waste your time.
So. Yeah. No, that's a great tip. Actually, we were just down at the Florida NARPM conference, and we're talking to Tenant Turner there, and we've known them for a while. They've used our tenant screening in the past too.
Okay.
So yeah, no, they're a great company. They gave me a nice pair of bright, very multicolored socks that I now have from the conference. So let's move on to your next tip here. So question number 2, how has a failure or apparent failure set you up for a later success?
So I think, and it's going to kind of go back to this that we just talked about. We, in our industry as property managers, there's a lot of technology that's constantly coming in and kind of shaking up the way we do things. About 4 years ago, when this self-showing thing kind of came onto the scene, we kind of ran through all of them before we settled on Tenant Turner. We tried Rently, which I really liked. It was just a price point issue for us.
Okay.
We tried Show Mojo, kind of crashed and burned with that because we were trying to save some money. Came back around and tried Tenant Turner, and it's really worked out well. Just because, I mean, we weren't afraid to try it, because the big thing was owners will never be on board with that. People are going to go in there and steal. Like, okay, well, so I've got their phone number, their email address, their name, and a copy of their driver's license. I don't think they're going to go in there and steal the refrigerator. Most people who are going to do that are just going to go around to the back door, kick it in, raise the garage door, and walk out with your refrigerator. And matter of fact, that happened to me when a refrigerator, washer and dryer on a house that we flipped and we're selling happened over the weekend. Somebody broke in the side garage door and helped themselves to the washer and dryer. And that had nothing to do with a self-showing issue. So we really thought we were going to get a lot of pushback on it. We decided to start trying it, and it's been maybe the best thing that we've done in our business in the past 3 years.
All right. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I think anyway, if you're, managing 500 doors like that if you can make things more simplistic, but like you said earlier too, you can have somebody coming in and looking at your property quicker. And I think a lot of ideas kind of die on the vine because you worry about the what ifs rather than the what could be, So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys still kind of push through that and, try to innovate and keep things moving forward. So
yes.
All right. All right, your third personal question here, and then we'll move to questions from the Facebook group. What is the craziest story or experience you've had in all of your years as a property manager?
Okay, so this happened. This was like early 2000s. Before I was managed, this was my own property. Back before you could take, we didn't even know what it meant to take a rent payment online back then. So constantly driving around. People are late. Let me go collect rent, try and call them. Maybe they answer, maybe they didn't. So I had a house, maybe not in the best area of town. So I headed out there to collect the rent. Nice spring day, had the windows down on my car, just kind of roll up in front of the house, and there's a guy sitting on the porch. And I didn't think anything of it. I actually thought, oh, good, somebody's home.
Yeah.
And I started to open the door, and he starts yelling from the porch, stay in the car, stay in the car. So I kind of like, what's going on? He comes up next to my window, taps on the door, and he goes, what you want? And I thought, oh, I know where we're going here. So I looked at him, I said, rent? And he said, oh, give me a minute. And he goes back in the house, and I'm sitting there in front of this house for, it feels like an eternity. It's probably, 5-10 minutes. And
I'm sure your brain's going like,
yeah.
oh,
I'm thinking, do I just leave? Are they making sure their guns are loaded? What? I don't know what to do at this point. So I'm just sitting there, and he comes back out in about 10 minutes, reaches through my side window like this with a roll of money this big and hands it to me and pays $700 in rent in 5s and 1s. And I didn't look at it. I just said, thank you, and peeled out of there as fast as I could. And then I called my friend who was on the Tulsa Police Department and gave him the address and asked him if they could do a friendly drive-by and see if there was any illegal activity happening at the house.
Yeah.
They were gone about 3 days later. So, but it was crazy because I just, you never know what's going on in your house. Obviously they were, selling some drug paraphernalia out of there. But, what am I? That's a problem. Whether it's me as a property manager or me as the homeowner managing my own property. What are you going to do? I mean, you're going to go up to the door and start yelling at them, tell them to get out, put yourself at risk. So it can be kind of hairy sometimes.
Yeah. It's probably a nice testimonial for all your online rent payment options.
Oh,
out there.
we don't. A matter of fact, I was telling you beforehand when we were talking, I got cussed out yesterday because a tenant was mad we wouldn't drive out to his house. He's already late, and we were about to file it with the attorney, and he was mad we wouldn't drive out to his house, which is about 40 minutes away, and pick up his rent.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, any new tenant now, it's 100% online payment.
Well, you got it right. So why don't we move on to some questions that come up in the Facebook group here?
All right.
So I thought that you'd have some good insights on this one. This one came from Jillian, and she said that she was just offered a job managing 40 townhomes. She said, interesting. It's a homeowners association. Anyone had any experience with this? What would be your advice to somebody who maybe has never done professional property management and they get one of these like random, offers like this?
So I saw that when it came up, and I was a little confused. Are they asking her to manage 40 rentals that are townhomes, or are they asking her to manage the homeowners association? Because it's two different animals. We used to do homeowners association management, and we sold off that part of our business because I just didn't like it. You get, I call him the HOA sheriff, comes to town, and it's some dude that doesn't have anything else to do but make hell for everybody else in the neighborhood because he's the HOA guy.
Yeah.
And so that's a different story. Now, if they're talking about, should you be a property manager for 40 homes? I would say, my first question is, Jillian, what's your background and do you have the proper licensing? This is kind of a hot button deal for me. Do you have the proper licensing in your area to be a property manager? There's a reason. Some people don't like it, but there's a reason you need to have, in most places, it's a broker's license. Now, some states are different, so before everybody blows me up, but most places require you to have your broker's license to manage property for others. And that's because it's a different deal. You've got a fiduciary responsibility now that you're taking on for holding tenants' money and holding owners' money and spending other people's money that is not yours, and how you account for that and where you put those deposits, and things like that. So I would say, very first thing, make sure that you're within the legalities of whatever your local or state municipality requires before you take something.
What would you say, like, beyond just the legalities, as far as like maybe personality or traits, character traits that somebody should have, they should consider if they're going to get into this?
Well, if you have a problem saying no, it's probably not a good deal for you. When I first started out, when I was managing my own stuff, and after you've done it for really almost 20 years, you kind of feel like you've heard most everything, and then somebody will come along and you'll hear another story that I haven't heard that one. But you just got to, you have to take the emotion out of it. I know it's tax season and your tax return is coming next week or the next week or the next week or the next week. But if you can't pay, my philosophy is very simple when it comes to tenants on their rent: pay or leave. I don't care which one you do, but if you're leaving, get out, or we're going to start the process to get you out. And we have a very defined process, and I won't say what it is because I don't want my tenants to hear it. But on this day, if you have not paid, you get posted. And by so many days later, it goes to the attorney. And there's really, there's not a lot of exceptions to that. It just has to go through the motions, and you just have to be hard about it. And sometimes it is hard because nobody likes to kick somebody out on December 15th. But guess what? If you don't, they're still going to be there on January 15th.
Yep.
Now you can have a heart. You can have a heart, but you still have to. It's a business.
Yeah.
You can't treat it like a business. It's going to be really, really hard for you. And the other thing I would say is, as soon as you make a step into managing properties for somebody else, you have to get a software to help you do that, to track it, to produce owner statements and things like that. It's different if it's you and you're tracking it on your spreadsheet, or in QuickBooks, whatever, that's fine. But if you're managing for somebody else, you need to have a professional management software.
Okay. I think
And
that's
there's lots of good ones out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's more by every week that goes by.
There are.
Hey, Andrew, if you're still watching, hope you're enjoying Orlando.
There he is.
He managed to work his way into the show, right? And just a quick hello to Debbie too, who's saying good morning to you. So moving along here, we get this question a little bit, but I was just curious, in your market out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Mark in the Facebook group was asking where everyone's looking for tenants other than Zillow or Marketplace. He's in Ohio. We can't really speak to that, but
Right.
Is there any source that you look at besides Facebook Marketplace, Zillow? Where do you look?
So yes and no. So the advantage I have of being a real estate broker is we put everything on our local MLS system. And then that filters out to some other places as well through MLS. So we get it on realtor.com. And using Tenant Turner, it also pushes it out to, it pushes it out to like 35 different websites.
Yep.
I don't know that we get calls or referrals from maybe more than 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
Apartments.com gets us some, even though we don't do apartments. Rentals.com, Trulia, Zillow. We put everything on Facebook Marketplace. We've gone back and forth over the years on Craigslist.
Yeah.
As of right now, we do not put anything on Craigslist. It's just become so much garbage on Craigslist.
That a lot of stacks of rent and 1s and 5s.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't put it on Craigslist. We do watermark our photos. I will say that. And I would encourage everybody to do that. You can download an app for $20 to watermark your photos, which will keep people from copying your stuff on Zillow that you're trying to rent for $1,100 a month and putting it on Craigslist, and you getting a call saying, hey, I found an ad on Zillow for $1,100 a month, and then another ad on Craigslist for $550 a month, but he wants me to wire the money and like, are you actually listening to yourself speak right now? If you would just say it out loud, are you going to wire money to somebody? Obviously it's a scam.
Well, maybe it's a long lost family member, there's an emergency and
that happens.
They're overseas and, they just need you to send this money real quick. And don't worry, you can get that rental for half price too.
Right.
So you get to help a family member out while also getting a deal on your rental.
Yeah. It's a great deal.
Yeah.
So I would say be leery of Craigslist.
Okay.
I think Marketplace is really the new Craigslist for a lot of people. So
how do you handle the communication flow with Marketplace? Because I know that's some people's concern is like, you just end up with this whole separate messenger app that's just going crazy. Do you have any tips or things that you do for that to handle it?
We try and put on there to, hey, call.
Okay.
So that, I'm on Facebook all the time, so I'll see it. It'll pop up if there's a notification, if I need to look, if somebody says, well, hey, when can I see this? And then I just respond back with the phone number.
Yeah.
Now, we're a little bit bigger operation. If it's, if you're a one-man show and it's your one vacancy, you may want to be calling them back and chasing them down. But we kind of have a process and a funnel that we put people through. And my theory is if you can't work through this funnel, it's not complicated. But if you can't work through this little funnel to start, you might not be the best tenant for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of like the pre-screening screening.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I've kind of flirted around too with like, you can create, if you're somebody like myself who has a full-time job, but you also have apartments, you can create like a custom Gmail address and just create an autoresponder on there. So if somebody does reach out to you, just say, hey, please email this. And then that autoresponder can have your own little funnel in there that just, take this survey, fill out this, do this kind of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do if you want to get creative with it.
Yeah. And I would also, it's just a side note on that, but I would also encourage people to have like a Google Voice number or something separate than, you don't want to be putting your personal cell phone on Facebook and Craigslist and Zillow. And it's not a good practice.
Yep.
I don't want that many people having my cell phone number.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that one 100%. All right. Moving on to our third and last question. So this one didn't come from anyone in particular. It just comes up in the group all the time. So the way I phrased it was, everyone asks, how do I handle ESAs and tenants? So with your experience, and you're going to all these NARPM conferences and you're getting access. I mean, I think before we jump in the call, you even said you've talked with people directly from HUD. How do you handle the situation when a tenant applies for your rental and then it comes up that they have an ESA? And what is your protocol? What is your process? How does that look?
So it's ever changing. I mean, we want to stay consistent as what we're doing at any one time. But as we get more information from either other people in the industry or HUD, we try and make sure we modify it and stay current.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was telling you about, 3 or 4 years ago when this first came down, it's like, this is the brand new hot topic issue. I told my staff at that point, I said, listen, if it's written in crayon and signed by Dr. Seuss, if that's their verification, we're going to take it, because I'm not getting in a fist fight with HUD. So now we've, as we've gotten more information, we've come along a little bit on this. And I'll ask you, Eric, if you know, what is the first time violation with HUD if they find a fair housing problem? What's the fine?
It's a pretty specific dollar amount, and I literally just wrote it down yesterday, but I think it's like 19,685 or something like that, right?
The very first, like if it's your very first thing, they can fine you $10,000, right? So
I might challenge you on that, actually. Are you sure?
I just read it about 2 weeks ago. Unless they change stuff so much, it could be new at this point.
They changed it. So here's one of the, beautiful things about reading things on the internet, which I contribute to with our blog, because I've got it in places on our blog that says 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
They came out, HUD, and I believe either last summer or 2 summers ago, they've upped all of those fines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
I'm making a note to check that.
Yeah, I'll send, I want to say, oh gosh. Because if you search this on Google, the first thing that shows up in your results will tell you $10,000, and then if you go down the searches, you'll find one that's more updated that they've increased it. So now I'm kind of curious.
Well, so even that, okay, so it's 10,000 or more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way we look at it is what are we willing to risk for ourselves or our owners to fight a particular question on a tenant with an ESA.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're not making stupid decisions, because I know on your podcast she did with Jamie, I think it was number 170, where she talked about all the ESA laws, and she's a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't even stay at Holiday Inn Express last night, so I'm not anywhere close to what she has knowledge on. Is just walking through to make sure. She said, if you get a complaint, forget the fine. You're going to pay 10 grand to the attorney just for the retainer.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there's any inkling of maybe you did something wrong,
mm-hmm.
and it's going to cost you $40,000, $50,000. And it clearly says in some of the HUD documents that I've read that just because you didn't intend to do wrong, that doesn't matter. They don't care what your intent was. So I think for a self-managing person, keeping up with a lot of the current laws and changes and what HUD expects it can be daunting, and it can be really, really expensive. And I see people on your site and on Bigger Pockets all the time complain, well, they have to do this and they have to do that, and they shouldn't be able to do this and that.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about, it's just reasonable accommodation. But the problem is, you're in my definition of reasonable, and the federal government are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. We are always going to err on the side of caution. If you've got an ESA, give me your documents. You got some documents, and maybe it is from certipet.com or whatever it is. Well, okay, maybe we're going to ask a few more questions, but what's it worth to really push back to collect an additional $300 pet fee?
Yeah.
But so if you look at return on investment on anything, right? $300 versus a potential $20,000 fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if they do more damage? Well, you were only collecting $300 anyway. They're still responsible for the damage. Now, you may have to chase it. You may have to go to court whether it's a ESA or a service dog or just a regular dog, they still are responsible for the damage.
I think where people get really mixed up too is not necessarily like comparing it like, well, $300 pet fee versus, the potential fines that you can get if you're caught, in violation, is when somebody sneaks one in after the fact. So they feel like they've been kind of, lied to through the process. So
right.
I think you touched on it earlier about being able to pull the emotion out of it, where it's like, you know what, this person may have done exactly what you think, or maybe they didn't. You don't know for sure. And then that's where you're kind of at that crossroads of like, well, you're going to let this eat you up and try to fight it and potentially, again, expose yourself to massive fines and heartache, or you're just going to accept it and say, this is what it is, and, learn from it, I guess.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like when you feel like they lied to you, that's when it kind of gets that emotion boiling up inside of you. And you're like, they shouldn't have lied to me. That's wrong. Well, it is wrong, but don't get so blinded by your need for your personal justice that you do something that costs you money.
Yep.
Because I mean, look, none of us are buying rent houses, and I own rent houses as well. None of us are buying homes just to, hey, we're just going to go out and whoever, and we just want to provide, great housing for the community. And I mean, that may be an underlying motive, but you're buying a house to make money. I mean, this is an investment for you. I mean, you wouldn't put money in the stock market and say, well, I'm buying Apple stock, and I really don't care what they do as long as they are, they really help the community at large. I mean, you're in it to make money.
Yeah.
So don't do something to put yourself in a position to take a big step back on that. And some people might say, well, that pet's going to tear up my house, and that's what I want to avoid. I tell all of our owners when they come on, unless you can give me a really, really, really good reason, if you want to be a good fit in our portfolio, we are a pet-friendly place. Because, I mean, statistics show it's something like 68-70% of people in America have pets. If you say no pets, you're setting yourself up for them to lie to you. Oh yeah, I don't have a pet. Then you go out and you see this dog bowl, and then my brother is out of town for a week and we're watching his dog. Okay, well that's fine. I don't care about that. I mean, they're gonna lie to you. So don't set yourself up for that.
I've had tenants lie to me about a pet when I lived in the apartment above them, and I was like, I'm like, you brought a husky into the house. The thing howls.
I can hear it.
Yeah. It literally sounded like a wolf was living in the house at night. It was like howling at the moon. I was like, are you guys, what are you doing? But I guess the better question is probably like, what am I doing? Like, so I got an interesting comment here from Jen Kuhn. So she's talking about some landlords are exempt federally and statewide, but they need to check and not use the wrong language in any way. Even if you are a cause, even if you are exempt from the FHA laws, you still have to defend yourself in court. So my guess is what she's talking about, and again, we'll preface this with none of us are attorneys, is that she's talking, my guess is Mrs. Murphy's exemption potentially.
Right.
So what do you say to somebody, a landlord who says, well, you know what, I'm pretty sure I'm exempt from the FHA because of Mrs. Murphy's exemption?
So, and I'll read it if you want. Here's the exemption. Does not apply to a private individual owner who sells his own home, and we would say, or rents, as long as he does not own more than 3 single-family homes, does not use a real estate agent, does not employ any discriminatory advertising practices, has not engaged in a similar sale or rental of a home within the 24-month period, and is not in the business of selling or renting dwellings. So, again, they like to deal in vague. So if you've got 3 single-family homes, then does not own more than 3. So if you've got 3 single-family homes, maybe you're fine. But are you in the business of renting dwellings if you've got 3 single-family homes? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, all it takes is an accusation, whether you're right or whether you're wrong. So, and if you live in a 4-unit building that you live in, you're exempt too.
Mhm.
So,
And that's not even like Jen was saying, that's, not statewide for every state. I think there's
right,
about 4 or 5 states that just go against that federal exemption and say,
right,
we're not accepting that in Wisconsin. I think it's one of them. So,
right. If you live anywhere on the West Coast that touches the ocean, you just assume that that the tenant is right every
yeah, yeah.
time. So,
I haven't heard it phrased that way, but I like that. That's a pretty good, easy rule of thumb there.
so all again, it's the accusation. I mean, how many times? I mean, I've been accused falsely of something before, and
Mhm.
guess what? It still cost me money,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I had to go defend myself and say, no, this is what happened. Here's our documentation. And, in the end, they say, well, you're right. You're exonerated.
Mhm.
But did I have to pay an attorney? Yes. Did I have to pay costs that go along with that? Yeah, for sure. So I would say try to avoid putting yourself in those situations, whether you feel like the exemption applies or not. The tenant doesn't care. And most of them are getting legal advice from somebody that's going to either do it for them for free or do it for them on some sort of contingency.
Mhm.
Um, Jamie and her deal said, "Hey, ask your attorney, ask your local attorney," and that's great too. But you know that costs you money. But um, don't be so stingy with your money on the front end when it comes to I don't want to hire a professional property manager because they cost money, or I don't want to hire an attorney because that costs money.
Mhm.
A lot of times, you it's way more expensive to not do that.
Yep.
And property management, I tell people, it's kind of like insurance. You don't need it till you need it, and then when you do, you're like, oh crap, what was I thinking? I should have done that.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I want to say too, I think Fox Rothschild, like it's some law firm that puts out a
mhm.
lot of good content on this
Yeah,
subject, where I read that the tenant, like you said, like the attorney might not even be charging them any fees because the attorney knows that they can cash in if their tenant wins and has a good case. I think the tenant can get $1,000 too, up to $1,000 in payment for these situations. So, it's good to understand that, because if I'm correct in that statement, because there's motivation sometimes. Like, it's not always there, but you could potentially have a target on your back for somebody
right.
who's looking for a situation where they feel that a landlord's being discriminatory. And we actually just covered this on our podcast that's going to be airing tomorrow. There was a landlord, and clearly he was not doing things well and by the book, but in Minnesota, who just got an $18.5 million class action filed against him because he wasn't, creating a habitable living situation for his tenants. So there's a lot of different ways that tenants can profit from a landlord not doing the correct thing. So,
Well, and I think that the big scare is, oh, I'm going to get fined by HUD.
mhm.
But to me, the big scare is, okay, most of these things don't ever make it to that level. They get settled,
Yeah.
right? So that other attorney for the tenant is taking it on, looking for a settlement.
Oh yeah.
So my question as a homeowner, where do you think that settlement's coming from? Your homeowner's insurance is not covering you on that.
Hmm.
I mean, so as a professional property manager, and I would always ask, if you're hiring a professional property manager, ask them, what kind of insurance do you have? I mean, so we have E&O insurance with specific riders for discrimination and fair housing and things like that. So potentially for us, then our insurance might step in and say, well, we want to settle and get this off the books.
Yeah.
But as an individual homeowner, you may not even have that to fall back on, and that attorney may be playing hardball with you and saying, well, we'll settle right now for $3,000, and then you're looking at it thinking 3,000 versus 10 or 3,000 versus 19.
Yep.
What am I going to do? And next thing you know, you're whipping out the checkbook.
Yep. Yep. And you're talking about the attorneys trying to go for a settlement. I just thought of it, out of that 18.5 million that I was talking about earlier that just got settled. How much of it do you think the attorneys got?
No, probably 65%.
Well, I think, you know what? Oddly enough, you're kind of close. 65. They got 6.5 million of that. Yeah. So it's just, it is what it is. And you got to just make sure you're, dotting your I's with all this stuff as you're doing
Right.
it. Also, a little feedback here. Shirley says loves this video. She'll be watching it again. So
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's not from the education I'm providing. So, but I'll take credit for it. Why not?
But definitely document, and that, I mean, every time, and we record all, and that's another thing. We record everything. So, and that's integrated into our software. But you can buy, again, don't be so penny pinching that you won't spend $20 on a great app for your iPhone or your Android or whatever you use, that you can record all these conversations with tenants. I mean, just record them. And then it's there. And if they come back and say, well, you told me, because this happens to me, I'll go back and listen. If when my property management people come in and say, hey, this tenant just called in and they were yelling and cussing and blah, blah, I'll just go back and listen to it and make sure, okay, did we do everything we could have done? And do I need to now call this tenant and have a conversation with them? But, you know, if you've got documentation, it goes a long, long way.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was that podcast that you just listened to on our episode 170, where Jamie said the ABCDEs.
Yeah, I'd never heard that before. That was great.
Yeah, always be consistent, document everything. That one stuck with me immediately. I was like, oh, that's good. I'm going to be using that a lot.
For sure.
All right, cool. Well, Tracy, I appreciate you coming on the show here and giving us some of your insights, and especially on the ESAs, because I know that comes up in the group quite a bit. So if anybody is watching this and you're from the Tulsa, Oklahoma area, do you guys manage any properties outside of Tulsa, or you stick to that area?
We're opening up in Oklahoma City here in probably another 3 months. So.
Okay. Very cool. And I believe your website, that's rentersplace.com. That's a pretty easy one to remember. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got lucky enough to come up with that, and then it wasn't taken, but it works for us. So.
All right. Very cool. Well, yeah, thank you again. And until next week, if you guys have any questions, you can always ask them in the RentPrep for Landlords Facebook group. Love seeing those questions coming in and stirring up, a lot of good engagement for everybody. And yeah, thank you again, Tracy.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.